Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Welcome to the Resilience and Disaster Risk Management Week of JPERS Learning Days. As you may already know, in lieu of our annual Learning Week, we are providing space and time for you to learn at your own pace, as well as participate in any of our GSG weeks with technical learning opportunities on the latest topics. Our learning catalog also includes over 200 archived technical sessions that were delivered over the past couple of years. In case you missed them, these recorded webinars are also available to you to choose from and view at your own pace on your own time. As such, I would like to advise you that this session is being recorded. You can type in your browser JPER Learning to get the latest information on the learning days. We will also be requesting you to fill out, please, a survey following the session. And Junko will kindly share the link in the chat box shortly. Today's learning event will focus on scaling up urban flood resilience through nationally facilitated local actions and will be based on experiences from Laos, Indonesia, and Senegal. The format of the session will include 3 presentations, followed by comments and reflections from our discussant, before moving on to questions and discussion. We invited our colleagues and TTLs of projects and programs which we believe are representative of a trend to expand efforts to reduce flood risk from large megacities to fast-growing, medium-sized, in relative terms, urban centers. These towns and cities experience increasing influx of people and growing asset base, which are becoming exposed to natural hazards if the development ignores disaster vulnerabilities. While the flood risk is increasing globally due to the climatic changes and a rapid urbanization, the smaller but dynamically expanding cities are places where the risk can still be managed at reasonable cost as compared to the benefits if the mitigation actions are not taken early on. The bank has been supporting governments to facilitate local efforts such as assistance to urban flood risk analytics, capacity building initiatives, knowledge sharing and learning opportunities, financing of investments in flood risk reduction, or helping enhance policies and regulations. These nationally facilitated programs implemented at the local level have a potential of scaling up transformational changes and innovation needed to strengthen urban resilience in growing cities. Today's session will showcase a variety of approaches adopted to the specific country context and introduced in a range of cities so they can become more resilient to flood risk. With this brief introduction, let me turn to our first presenters, Keiko Saitos, Senior DRM Specialist, and Dixie Mengot-Kwa, Infrastructure Specialist, who will present the integrated flood risk management in the Mekong River and case of Lao PDR. Keiko and Dixie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jolanta. So if I may share my screen. So is the screen clear to everyone? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction, Jolanta. So I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so together with my colleague Dixie Mengotikwa, who's going to do the second half of the presentation on the project that we are implementing in Lao PDR, titled the Integrated Flood Risk. Well, it's actually called the Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Management Project, but focusing very much on flood risk management. So it doesn't move. Here we are. So just very briefly to introduce the Lao PDR, the country itself. It is one of the Southeast Asian countries. And as I mentioned, flooding is really the major hazard that the country has. And together with floods, of course, droughts do also affect the country quite significantly. Not so much geohazards, although there are some areas in the north where there are some earthquakes occasionally. So I'm just hoping that there won't be any major ones in the future. But climate change, of course, will exacerbate the disaster risk, the flood risks. So we are expecting to see more intense extreme events going into the future, up to well, for the next 50 to 100 years. And the predicted damage to the urban infrastructure on an annual basis is expected to rise quite significantly, as you see on the screen. We also have a very unique situation in Laos. In fact, it also applies to Cambodia and Vietnam as well. The Mekong River runs through the country from China, and there are many new dams are being built. So how this affects the flood risk going into the future is something that I think the academic community is just starting to address. So the current risks that have been evaluated, assessed, are based on. Excuse me. Could you mute if you're not talking? I think I hear a bit of background noise. So what the dam will do in terms of affecting the flood risk is something that really is a bit of an unknown at the moment. So the current assessments and the risk reduction measures are currently based on the pre-dam situations. So actually the Mekong is at a turning point, and I think it requires a little bit more of research in the very near future for us to be able to adapt to the new situation. As you can see, there are 55 large dams, and that's a very, very large number. And there was in 2018, sorry, did I say 2000? 2018, a breach in the hydropower Saddle Dam in the Atapu province, which caused quite a significant damage. And I believe Susanna, who's on the call, was perhaps involved in the damage assessment. So safety review of the dams is another issue that is very much high in the priority of the government. And some safety reviews have been done by the EU, and the bank had invested in developing dam safety, construction and operation guidelines for the Lao government. Not sure why it takes so long to change to the next slide. Here we are. So just to introduce the project itself very briefly, the project has three main components. And as today's topic is integrated flood risk management, I think it probably is worth touching upon all three just very briefly, although the main focus of the talk will be on component one, which directly deals with flood risk reduction through the building of embankments and floodgates and non-structural investments as well. So we are in component one doing the structural measures and non-structural measures dealing with the directly with the flood risk, but then in component two, we are also strengthening the capacity of the Hydromet agency, the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology, whereby they are integrating their system and also strengthening their service delivery to enable better flood risk the flood risk warning and not just floods, but also intense weather events as well. And also impact-based forecasting is part of what's being done. So that's component two. And then in component three, we also have the disaster risk financing strategy development, which also complements all this from the financial side of things. So those three components put together should strengthen the country's ability to deal with flood risks going into the future. And when we talk about integrated flood risk management, I think perhaps one thing that is missing is the really last mile community-based flood risk or flood resilience. So that is something that is missing from the project, but pretty much everything apart from that is included. So as we're going to be talking about flood risk management, I think we need to talk about the overall national level master plan that was developed by the Korean government, with the support of the Korean government, by the Lao government. So this is a master plan for integrated flood risk management for the overall Mekong River. And it did look at the entire stretch of the river, and it was also prompted by the number of flood events starting around in 2008 and and had been happening on a very regular basis. So the government was very aware that the flood risk needed to be dealt with for the country to become more resilient. So there was all these basic investigation and technical analysis. I won't go into the details because we don't have enough time, but quite a substantial amount of work went into developing this master plan. So what we are doing is we actually did leverage this master plan, and through discussions with the government came up with some priority projects. Through the master plan, there were about 16 locations that were highlighted as high priority for the government, and of which 3 had been identified for this project to be the investment target. Those 3 locations are the Muonsai city in Udomsai province, Luang Prabang. Perhaps you might have heard of this name. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it used to be the old capital of Laos before Vientiane became the capital. And also Pakistan in Borikamsai province, which is also a critical transportation hub that has a road that goes into Vietnam and also a very important bridge into Thailand. Muonsai is also very important from a transport point of view because it is where the road to China is connecting and is a very major hub from a transport point of view. And it does have quite a high flood risk, in which the city gets flooded very often. So the government did consider this Muonsai to be a very important place and to reduce the risk. Just to also mention the fact that there's been this new railway that was opened in December last year, and it now has made Laos from a landlocked country into a land-linked country, which has been quite a significant change in terms of how the country now can position itself in terms of trade. So it's connected China all the way down to through Laos all the way down to the Vientiane / Thailand border, which allows more better trade through the country, and is really starting to take off because of the convenience of the having the railroad. So Muonsai, as you can see, the map on the left, it shows the locations of where we are doing our project. The first one, the green one, the balloon is Muonsai, and then Luang Prabang in orange, and then Borikamsai is not exactly directly on the line, but right next to Vientiane, and quite an important location, as I mentioned before, because of the location's route to Vietnam. So through for the development of the master plan, of course, it had a lot of consultations that were done, but this is not our project, so I'm just conveying the processes that the Lao government went through to develop the master plan. So all the way from basic surveys, field surveys, consultations with the local authorities, and short listing and evaluation, and then coming up with the priority 16 locations, as I mentioned, was the procedure that they took. I think this is just perhaps repeating what I already mentioned. So these are the 16 locations long listed, and we have covered 3 of those locations. And the type of investments cover river deepening, widening, bank protection, riprap, concrete blocks, access stairs, etc., to make the erosion risk less. and also floodgates, pumping stations, so et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps I will hand over to my colleague Dixie from here.
Thank you, Keiko. So I hope everybody paid attention and remember the two provinces that we worked on for this Lao Cedron project. That was Luang Prabang and Buri Kamsai. So the next couple of slides, we'll talk about the third province, which is Wang Sai and Udomsai. So this slide shows a technical assistance program that we did in 2017 with support from GFDRR. So the image on the left was what they had before. It was a very coarse analysis done in 2009. And then following some flood events in 2017, we supported the government to do more detailed analytics, which provided sort of the baseline technical information so that we could decide on the type and the scale of investments that we did for Muang Sai, Udomsai province for the Lao Cedron project. Next, please. So we wanted to show this aspirational example for the Namko River in Udomsai. So it passes through two riverside parks marked in boxes in this image. Next, please. So for those who are familiar with landscape design, you will notice that this is quite frankly, quite standard for something the landscape architects deliver. You have ecotones and eco corridors, etc. And the vision was to provide a quiet and relaxing place. But we have to remember that this area is already very rural in nature to begin with. So the designs had to be refined and to some extent scaled down to match the provincial context. Next slide, please. So the images on the left show the actual conditions on site. So most areas have no access to roads or to the river. And then the objective was really to increase accessibility from the roads to the rivers. So the final design is on the right-hand side. We learned a number of lessons, particularly to really respect the local context, secure budget and early buy-in of the community into the design, and then start small and ensure compatibility with the community interests. We can delve into this more in the Q&A if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, the investments for the Lao Cedron project are in 3 provinces, in Muang Sai, in Pak San, and in Luang Prabang. So the Korean master plan informed the investments for Pak San and Luang Prabang, and the GFDRR TA informed our investments in Muang Sai. Next slide, please. So we talked a lot about structural investments, but we also shouldn't forget about non-structural investments. So in parallel, we are doing these activities under the Lao Cedron project. So we are preparing baseline studies, a digital elevation model for priority cities in Lao, which will feed into an integrated urban flood resilience strategy that we are doing sometime later this year. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you have about our Lao project.
Thank you very much, Dixie and Keiko. And as you mentioned, and I mentioned it in my introduction, we will have time for questions and answers after all presentations, free presentations. So with this, let me introduce a group of our next presenters, and this will be Halik Risky, DRM specialist, Jan Vun, senior DRM specialist, and Haris Sanahuja, senior DRM specialist, who spearhead the efforts to reduce flood risk in Indonesian cities. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jolanta. Good morning, good evening, everyone. So I, with Harrison Dian, we're going to be presenting a few slides that reflect our experience and engagement for over the past few years with the government of Indonesia on urban flood resilience technical assistance program, with the view of setting the foundation for the national program for urban flood resilience in the country. So in the first few slides, I'm going to give a little bit context about floods in Indonesia. In this slide, you can see some graphs that are related to flood in Indonesia that on the left-hand side, you can see that analysis from available data from the Indonesia Disaster Database managed by the National Disaster Management Authority, BNPB, show that the number of flood disaster events is increasing. Where in 2020 alone, more than 1,400 flood events were recorded, rising more than 7 times than in 2013. In addition to that, the occurrence of floods is the most frequent among all natural disasters in Indonesia that account for more than 40% of total recorded events. And at the same time, you can see that floods continue to affect more people than any other type of disaster in Indonesia. 60% of total number of people affected. Next, please. So the impacts of flooding are expected to rise due to population increase, climate change, and economic growth. Climate change will cause increasing flood hazards due to rising sea levels and increasing rainfall amounts and intensities. And as the population grows, the number of people exposed to hazard will also continue to increase. On the left-hand side, you can see that analysis done by Altares using global aqueduct model show that people at risk from river floods will increase due to population growth and also climate change, bringing the combined effect to 75% increase by 2055. The result of the risk analysis show that urban population growth is the most dominant factor in the increase. Whereas on the right-hand side, you can see that people at risk from coastal flooding will increase due to population growth and also climate change, bringing the combined effect to 73% by 2055. Next, please. So what caused all of this? Based on our analysis and also observations in some of the cities in Indonesia from our technical assistance program with the government of Indonesia. So we did some analysis in some cities with different flood risk profiles. We found that there are some common issues. So first and foremost, there's a need for better planning to incorporate risk consideration into land use planning through the identification of flood-prone areas, the need for comprehensive flood master plan, land use development policy to control land conversion, and also environmental degradation. In addition to that, lack of operation and maintenance, limited investment in flood risk management, resulting in continued flooding and inundation. I'm gonna hand over to Gian.
Thank you very much, Halik. So based on some of this technical analysis, and this was all supported by a very strong technical assistance program, we're very fortunate to get funding from both GFDRR and the Swiss through SECO to support the TA program over a couple of years. And through all of this analysis, the government of Indonesia, with support from the World Bank team, develop a national urban flood resilience program design. So really coming back to this theme of urban flood resilience through nationally facilitated local actions, the government designed a national level program that would support Indonesian cities, and not just on investments at city level, not just to do the flood resilience measures. We've heard from the Lao PDR team that obviously an integrated approach of structural and non-structural flood resilience measures is quite key. And in addition, in Indonesia, we also discussed with the government on things like innovative financing options at the local level. So, while the central level can facilitate these, subnational level actions and investments, how does the local government sustain these investments in the longer term? How do they do the operations and maintenance? How do they also leverage, investments, through other funding sources to increase their urban flood resilience? Because obviously, this all culminated into a proposed, World Bank finance operation. We are preparing now a $400 million national urban flood resilience project to support the establishment of this national program and invest in 5 selected cities, 5 Indonesian cities. And these are what we call secondary cities. They're not the large cities like Jakarta. $400 million would not even put a dent in the flood risk problems that Jakarta has. So these are smaller cities like Bima and Medan and Manado, Semarang and Banjarmasin. So even though these are secondary cities, the investment financing that we provide will still be relatively limited. So we had some very good discussions with the local level governments on how they can consider innovative financing options in the future, through developer incentivization schemes, looking at floodplain development in safer parts of the floodplains, and then also looking at governance structures, because in Indonesia, the governance of flood risk management is quite complicated. There are central levels, provincial levels, city levels, district and neighborhood levels of governance. And as we know, flood risk is a multi-sectoral issue, and it's not just the Ministry of Works or the local works agencies that are responsible. You have the ministries of environment, the disaster management offices, the hydromet offices, and the weather bureaus, and the spatial planning offices. There are so many actors that need to work together to reduce flood risk. So one of the key, requirements of the National Urban Flood Resilience Program, including under the World Bank Finance proposed project, is that cities will be required to establish a city-level task force, including all the relevant actors in government as well as non-government, to help make decisions on which actions and measures will be carried out and implemented under the project. So the four key components of the proposed program, and which we adopted under the World Bank Finance project, is number one, flood risk analytics and investment planning. Number two, flood resilience investments or measures. Number three, institutional strengthening and knowledge management. And number four is on program management and implementation support. And that last one is not just the typical, World Bank, project fiduciary safeguards sort of support. It's importantly trying to establish the national program platform, because the government, through their Ministry of National Development Planning, is really the key champion for setting up this national program. The Ministry of National Development Planning is responsible for interagency coordination, and they have really been the ones trying to ensure that it's not just a top-down, central-driven program, but it's actually also a bottom-up driven, program where we've really, sought the feedback from city governments over the past few years to design this program and this proposed project. And indeed, many of the ideas, especially, for example, component 3, came from the cities themselves, saying that they are the ones that need this capacity building. They are the ones that want to learn more about nature-based solutions and water-sensitive urban design, how to deal with green bonds at the local level. So the idea materialized to have this national level knowledge management center or resource center, so that the cities could exchange good practices and innovation with each other. This is just a very quick example to illustrate how at the subnational level some of the measures will be implemented. So this is in the city of Bima, a small growing city of about 150,000 people. And they really are trying to be a small growing green city with tourism opportunities along the waterfront and in the nearby islands. So it's a smaller city, but they already are experiencing significant flood risk issues, particularly from the result of upstream development and unsustainable agricultural practices, and plenty of urban developments that are not following any sort of regulation or development control policies. Even though they often do exist at the local level in Indonesia, the issue is the compliance, at the local level, and the awareness of communities and developers about these regulations. So one of the proposed sub-projects in the World Bank Finance project in the city of Bima is to develop a multi-purpose open space in one of the local parks. So it's already an existing park, so it would be retrofitting this park called Taman Ria. And this would have a multifunctional purpose of not only flood resilience and retaining, stormwater, but also have co-benefits of improved public spaces, urban regeneration, recreational spaces for nearby community members, and to overall improve the ecological benefits of having improved green spaces. So I'll now pass to my colleague Harris to have some final reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Gian. And as you can see from the description of the project, we are talking about a very ambitious and complex operation. And while we are not able to discuss lesson learned from the implementation at this stage, hopefully we'll start implementation next calendar year. There are some challenges that can be identified from the preparation process. So just to close our presentation, I would like to share a couple of reflections against the backdrop of the guiding principles that were introduced by Gian, and you can see in the slide again. And the first one has to do with the overall challenge of setting the basis of a national program pursued by this operation. There's a need to factor the trade-off of an operation that will be fully implemented by the central level, and at the same time aims at having the local governments in the driving seat. And this is particularly challenging when your main implementing partner is the Ministry of Public Works. How to fully engage the cities and its local authorities when the resources won't flow through them, and when most of the investment will be implemented by river basin organizations under the umbrella of this Ministry of Public Works. This is something that we try to address through the design of the operation and with the inclusion of some key elements in the components that were explained by Gian before. For example, in component 1 that was focused on the analytical part, the study, the flow risk assessment, there is a subcomponent that aims at developing multi-year city flood investment options and plans that provides a concrete venue for the city participation and a concrete outcome in terms of a planning and investment tool for cities. And the second point is about the relevance of having a component on institutional strengthening and knowledge management, the third component in the design, which is a small component in terms of the whole amount of the loan, but it is critical and it has a big specific weight for the broader goal of setting the basis of the national program. As you know, urban flood risk requires a high level of knowledge and experience, and there's a clear need to provide such support at the national level through the establishment of a knowledge hub or center or platform, whatever you want to call it, where a critical mass of human resources can support local authorities in flood risk management, based on experience built up nationwide and supported by high-level education and training. And this is a notion that is easily understood and embraced. But in terms of finding the right house and the institutional champion to implement it is very difficult, and it's something that we have been struggling with the client. And I'm sure, and I see some colleagues from LAC region and from Africa that can relate to this problem, to find the institutional house and the champion for this knowledge base. So just to conclude, beyond these challenges, I think I can speak on behalf of Halik and Gian, as well as the NUFREP team. I see some members of the NUFREP team here, Jessica, of course, and Dixie, that presented before. This is a very exciting operation with the potential to have a transformative impact in the way Indonesia address the increasing level of urban flood risk in the country. And we hope, Yolanda, that in the near future we can share more insight from the implementation on the ground. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Harris, Gian, and Halik. We will now from the EAP region and examples from Indonesia and Laos, we will move on to Africa, and especially the case of Senegal, which will be presented by Isabel Kane, senior DRM specialist in the Africa region, and she will share with us efforts to promote good practices in climate change adaptation, integrated urban management, and stormwater management. So Isabel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much, Holanta. Sorry for the last request. I am experiencing some internet connection issue. And good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to share with you some experience from the Senegal Stormwater Management and Climate Change Adaptation Project, specifically on urban institutional and regulatory framework. As you can see in the first on the first slide, Senegal is located in the western part of the African continent. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. The country population is 13.5 million, of which 45%. Now it's almost 15 million, let's say 15 million, of which 45% live in the cities. And Dakar, the capital, has 25% of the population, living only in 0.3% of the national territory. And urban flood affect most of the Senegalese cities, mainly due to weak urban governance and informal settlement. The city has 40% of the cities is informal is concerned by informal settlement. Next slide, please. To present in brief the stormwater management and climate change project. Yes, this project phase 1 has been implemented from 2012 to 2019. And since the project has been successful in addressing flood issues in a large part of the Dakar peri-urban area, as well as in leveraging new vision and reform for integrated flood management and more resilient cities. Second phase was funded in 2021, last year, namely Project 2. And this project phase 2 aimed to extend integrated urban flood approach in more area in Dakar, while consolidating the change of vision in the overall urban sector at national level. And here are listed the range of areas covered by under the project, and some instrument and tool also developed. Next slide, please. I will also share with you some illustration of the output from the project. On the screen, you are seeing the preparation of the drainage, the drainage master plan of Dakar, and the preparation of this DMP following a drainage by gravitation up to the sea, allowed to coordinate intervention at the catchment level and harmonize the flood management approach for different donor and government projects. The DMP also identified non-constructible zone, given that this area are flood prone or temporary storage basin in the drainage system, is what you will see in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, you can see in red color all the non-constructible and flood-prone area identified under the drainage master plan. And next slide again. Here you can see the detailed urban master plan that was prepared by the project. And this detailed urban master plan has consolidated the integrated fluid management approach by regulating land use in the overall DMP covered space. As you know, the detailed urban master plan is the legal document, and it regulates the land use in the Dakar peri-urban area. The detailed urban master plan include also the protection of wetland right away of the drainage master plan, also its approach was to develop green equipment in all non-constructive zones to protect this zone against settlement and future settlement. Next slide, please. I'm sharing also some additional illustration of the project output, notably a photo of the drainage work impact before and after the drainage network was built. Also, some photo taken before, during, and after the drainage work. This is the next slide. And some example of green equipment we built on the non-constructible zone. Next slide, please. Next. Okay, and this stage, I would like to share with you 3-4 lesson learned good practices that seem to be, to me, essential to consider when designing and implementing an integrated urban flood management project. First, it is important to develop and provide ahead the urban planning step needed knowledge to key urban stakeholders in order to give them a better understanding of flood and climate risk challenge, policy, as well as policy gap and needed flood control solution. And the project has developed significant information such as hydraulic and climate modeling, flood risk mapping, modeling of the coastal zone dynamic that is important for the design of the drainage outlet to the sea. The project developed also territorial information system and GIS. Also, the project has signed memoranda of understanding with the key local and central government, urban and water management agency. And this one actively participate to the development of all the urban instrument and tool funded by the project. Learning by doing, they were also trained and equipped to replicate the same tool and instrument with an integrated and climate-sensitive approach to other cities. The expectation was well met because
movidita, a ver si puedo mover todo esto. No.
Please turn off your mic if you're not speaking.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And yes, I was saying that the expectation was met because all the next government and partners similar intervention in urban planning and flood management follow the same approach initiated by the project. And this under the leadership of the Urban Ministry and Water Sanitation Department that were at the core of the project urban component implementation. Next slide, please. Second, lesson learned and good practice I will share with you is about the participatory, needed participatory approach of national and local stakeholders in the development of integrated urban food management, because this enables a shared vision of challenges and key issues and allow better ownership of strategic document. We all know that flood management is transversal and involves several actors, and building a common vision is essential for a successful urban flood resilience engagement. Also, watershed basin most of the time cover several municipalities and beyond the administrative border. And promoting intercommunal cooperation is essential for the definition and implementation of structuring and coordinating response to recurrent flood. This specifically can help to avoid conflict between communities, municipalities, who sometimes are difficult to convince that stormwater from flooded areas should be drained through their areas to the sea, or that they need also to be part of the solution, even they are not heavily affected by flood. And the project supported the creation of intercommunal entity in all its intervention area, and this has been very helpful to define this shared vision, manage conflict, and yes, and develop ownership regarding the strategic document at the watershed basin level. Okay, next slide, please. The integration of climate change, we believe also that the integration of climate change and flood risk can be only effective and sustainable when they are embedded in the national urban policy. And the project supported a comprehensive review of the national urban policy and urban plan document, and also the project assessed how sustainable cities aspects have been considered in the national urban policy, and urban policy gap analysis was also prepared. The high participation, level of participation and ownership from the urban stakeholders at local and national level along all the process help to undertake some key reforms in the, notably in the urban code and the urban policy. And in line with the project recommendation, the revision of the national urban code and urban policy are ongoing to better promote sustainable cities model, including integrated flood management at the country level. And this process is being supported by the project 2. The project 1 established the review of the national urban policy and urban plan document, and the project 2 is supporting the making all this reform, finalizing all this reform and making them operational. Last and not least, it is important. We believe that ensuring clear, institutional, and viable stormwater. Sorry, last and but not least. Sorry, I'm making some confusion in the term. Yes, here on this slide, I will just like to bring your attention about the need to have clear institutional and viable stormwater and flood management framework, including operation and maintenance, because this is essential for the system sustainability. And in the case of the project, when we start designing the first phase of the project, the stakeholders' role and responsibilities in stormwater and flood management were not clearly defined. And this led to a lack of efficiency in the overall country strategy and effort to reduce urban flood. The project supported to address this challenge and better clarify role responsibility. The project supported the review of the stormwater management institutional framework and propose a structural reform that designate the National Office of Sanitation, namely ONAS, as responsible entity for operation and maintenance. And the project also suggests a sustainable financial mechanism, including the creation of a sanitation fund. What we can also say is that beyond the institutional consensus, a strong political will is needed to make operational and sustainable the operation and maintenance financing mechanism. The project supported the capacity building of owners to allow him assume his new role and help progress on the creation of the sanitation fund. But unfortunately, the putting in place this sanitation fund is still a big challenge, because as you know, when you ask the government, Minister of Finance, to in a country like Senegal, developing country with a lot of budget constraint, when you ask to the government to make an additional sustainable budget, is become very challenging, and we are still making a lot of policy dialogue with the government to make sure that before the project 2 is completed, this sanitation fund will be put in place and operational.
Isabel, we will need to finalize this presentation. We're running a bit of time, but please, last word if I can ask about the presentation. I'm sorry.
Okay, I can stop here. I can stop here, and I am open to provide any clarification to colleague. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Very, very interesting, and we often turn to example and to you from Senegal. I remember, in fact, when this project was being born. So very, very interesting. I would now like to introduce Susanna Stanton-Geddes. She is a senior DRM specialist in ECA region, co-lead of the urban flood community of practice, who also co-authored several publications and guidance notes on the urban flood risk management. Susanna, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, colleagues. This was really a very exciting and excellent set of presentations. I had the pleasure to contribute to some of these projects, and it's great to see progress made. I don't want to talk too much. There are many observations we could highlight and so many good lessons learned, but I would just focus on 3 that I think echo and line up also nicely with what we have seen. So first of all, it might seem we always talk about the same subject: urban flood risk management, drainage, different needs, balancing structural and non-structural. But in fact, we can see that it's really an evolving issue. It is climate change driven, so that changes really our calculations. The development drive is continuous. It's really amazing. You in some places the urbanization changes really within the years your risk profile that you have created or your risk assessment, or it can be additional dams created or a new railway. So that contributes to this evolving issue. And thirdly is the commitment, right? Political leadership also changes and the vision of a city or of an area. And that brings me to my second point, which is really commitment to managing flood risk by institutions, but to manage them in a comprehensive manner. A lot of the times institutions will come just with their preset idea. Often it is just the structural or the engineered solutions, but there is a need to have this commitment to have a more comprehensive approach. And for that, as it was mentioned in the presentations, you really need the right data, the right analytics, the right communication ways to actually explain the complexity and bring the topic nearer to the different groups. And and what's very needed, apart from communication tools, is also methods. So participatory methods. And that brings me to my third and final point, which is local capacity. I think the biggest challenge in what we see in implementation on flood risk management investments is local capacity. There can be great laws in place, but if the local authorities don't know what to do, how to coordinate among their colleagues within an administration, and how to importantly engage with communities, with business sector, with academia, local universities, etc., then it really won't go far. So I really appreciate also from the projects highlighting these efforts where it is the national level really creating an enabling environment and increasing the capacities of the local authorities, of the local engaged agents, including communities, to be able to resolve their issues. So I would flag these three issues: evolving challenge, the need for commitment to a comprehensive solution and sustainable solution, and the third, local capacity and local engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zuzanna. Very good comments and points to keep in our mind. So now I will open for questions. We have very limited time indeed. We had very rich presentations. So I would like anybody who would like to ask a question to maybe raise hands for me to see. I don't see any yet. Yes, we may have shy audience. Okay, so maybe I will kickstart a little bit. Yes, do we have? Oh, we have hand. Let me see whose hand. Camille, I think. Yes. Is that a hand from Camille?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes,
Please
go ahead. Yes.
to all the presentations, a lot to take in. I was particularly struck with Isabel's point around the participatory approach for urban flood management. And I think we often talk about participatory approaches, but they're harder in action. What did you do to ensure those steps, or how did you find it in practice?
Isabel, I think that was a question to you, but others can come in as well. Anybody would like to come in about the participatory aspects?
Maybe whilst Isabel's trying to reconnect, I can just quickly say some experiences from the Indonesia perspective, Yolanta. So it's a very good point, Camille. And with the Indonesia flood program, when we developed the technical assistance side of of the project preparation, we really tried to do a participatory approach to design the program, not just with the local governments, but also with people of diverse backgrounds, so people with disabilities, with women's representative groups. And we had actually Dixie was also part of the team that deployed some design workshops. So we went to cities and we actually literally had maps and drawings, and we encourage the community and stakeholders and the local government stakeholders to participate in the redesign of their city. So we had facilitators that were technical, but we said to the participants that, you know, you do not need to be technical to help shape the urban design and the urban planning and the flood resilience measures of a city. And I think that's key, is that people sometimes feel afraid to participate because they think they're not technical. And flood risk management sometimes can feel very, very technical, and it does need to be for the flood risk modeling side. But in terms of participatory planning, you know, it's really important to make people feel included and to make sure these diverse voices are captured. I'll stop there.
Anybody else? Or I don't know if Isabel is connected. Maybe she's got problems with connections. I don't see any more hands. We are about to finish, but I would like to raise one last issue before we close. And Keiko and Dixie mentioned about the master plan and 16 locations of possible interventions. And of course, in Indonesia, we looked at quite large number of cities as well before zooming in, as presented by Halik, Harris, and Jan on some pilots. If you can elaborate a little bit more on how you agreed on the specific cities, because the needs are vast, the countries are prone to risk. There are many cities that of various sizes that need those investment and actions to be taken. How did you approach? And I just wonder, if there are any differences in approaches on focusing on these particular locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanta. So maybe Susanna might have more institutional knowledge on what exactly happened, but my understanding is that, as I showed on the first couple of slides, the locational importance of the investments that we are making, it became a really important deciding factor, as I understand. So Monsai, it being a transportation hub that links China with Laos, and then also to Thailand as well. Was it Thailand? And also Luang Prabang, because of its importance, the importance in terms of the tourism. It is one of the major places where a lot of people come and enjoy the local culture. So I think that was one of the major decision making factor. Am I correct, Susanna?
Yeah, indeed, the economic importance, of course, it was known for being risk prone. And in addition, the additional financing that was provided also just was highlighted by the fact that there were floods in recent years. So it wasn't a process like in Indonesia where kind of narrowing down. It was more already on the radar screen of the government and of the ministries.
If I could just add, there was also a slide that Keiko presented. The government did have 4 focal areas that were ranked by status, and then the consultants kind of met them halfway with some technical analytics to support the decision-making process, like multi-criteria analysis. So that kind of made the whole city selection process very well-rounded. So you have more economic considerations, social considerations, as well as technical and flood risk management considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dixie, Keiko, and Susanna. Anything from Halik and Harris and Jan on Indonesia?
Sure, sure, Donna. Just to share a little bit experience from Indonesia experience. So Indonesia has, I think, more than 160 or 160 cities, I think. But we ended up, choosing 5 cities. The way that we came to that, that conclusion was that obviously, apart from the political reasons, that we developed sort of like a criteria that we agreed with the government, including the, as mentioned by Dixie, both incorporating the economic aspect, the population, and also the strategic importance of the locations, because there are many cities or locations in Indonesia that are priority in terms of the, economic development zone, etc. And one of the other aspects is because Indonesia is a archipelago country, is that we try to include, criteria related to geographic spread, not only focus in Java, which is the most populous island in the world, but also the other major islands in Indonesia, so that we ended up with the selection of the 5 cities that are spread across the country, and also more importantly, with different flood risk profiles, so that we kind of like, try to gather as much of information as possible during the first phase of the project, so that we can sort of like replicate in the future phase of the project implementation. Thanks, Yolanda.
Thank you very much. And with that, we already ran out of time, or a little bit beyond. So I would like to thank all presenters and Zuzana, our discussant, and also all the participants and those who connected, and Junko for organizing this session and keeping us on track. And I would ask you to fill this survey, and link was sent in our chat. So thank you again for the great presentations and cases. And anybody who could not connect to us can access this recorded session. Thank you. Have a good day or evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.